I genuinely think most people have no idea how different the world can feel through coloured lenses. And once you experience the right one, normal glasses start to feel incredibly flat. Now, everyone online shows you what these lenses look like from the outside, but almost nobody shows you what they actually feel like to wear. And honestly, that's where the decision gets made.
You're now tuned in to the Optical Gallery.
If you're new to the channel, I'm Nick, creator of eyewear, lens artist and dispensing optician at the Optical Gallery. And over the last year, I've noticed more and more people becoming obsessed with warmer tone photochromic colours. You've got Transitions Ruby, Zeiss PhotoFusion Burgundy, Dinamica Amaranth and Dinamica Pink Rio. Now technically yes, some lean slightly more pink, some more burgundy, others ruby, but for me, they all sit within this same warm red tone spectrum. And what's interesting is, they all create completely different visual atmospheres. Now just to be clear from the start, this isn't about which one is best, because honestly, I don't think there is a best. They're all trying to create slightly different experiences. And that's what makes this fascinating, because as a lens artist, I'm not just interested in how it looks from the outside. I'm interested in how it feels, how it affects the environment, how it changes mood, and how you actually experience the world through it. So for this experiment, we've come down to our local park here in London. This is pretty much the perfect photochromic weather. The sun's out, cool breeze, bright enough for activation without feeling extreme. And this is exactly why for so many people, photochromic lenses have become their daily drivers, especially here in the UK, because they all adapt naturally with the environment around you. But enough talking, let's activate them side by side. Now straight away, there's actually not much between it when it comes to activation speed. Transitions Ruby and PhotoFusion Burgundy are pretty much neck and neck. The Dinamicas Amaranth and Pink Rio just slightly behind. That's not really surprising, because these technologies are all approaching photochromics slightly differently. Transitions Ruby definitely feels like the most performance-led. It reaches one of the darkest densities here, and probably feels the closest to traditional sunglass experience. PhotoFusion Burgundy sits in a really balanced position, good depth, good activation speed, while still keeping the environment feeling natural overall. And then there's the Dinamicas. A Dinamica feels less focused on speed, darkness, or pure performance numbers, and more focused on atmosphere, emotion, colour experience, and individuality, which personally I really appreciate, because not everybody wants the fastest lens or the darkest lens. Sometimes people want mood, atmosphere, personality, and visual emotion. And honestly, sometimes I don't want the fastest changing lens. Sometimes I actually enjoy the transition happening. I enjoy the atmosphere slowly shifting around me. And that's where eyewear stops feeling purely functional and starts feeling experiential. And cosmetically, this is where personalities really separate. PhotoFusion Burgundy immediately feels more mature, more refined, more atmospheric. Ruby feels deeper, cleaner, more saturated, and probably the easiest visual transition for somebody coming from traditional sunglasses. Amaranth sits in this really interesting middle ground, still expressive, still artistic, but calmer. And then Pink Rio. Honestly, Pink Rio just owns the room. That lens doesn't whisper. This is why I don't think Dinamica is trying to compete directly with Transitions or PhotoFusion. It's doing something different. These lenses are for the fashionistas. They understand fashion. That's just the Italian culture coming through their DNA. They don't shout, they just make it work. And what I really appreciate is they've not only focused on how the lenses look from the outside, they've also nailed the emotional feeling when you actually look through them. And for me, those are the two things that make Dinamica special. The external aesthetic, the internal atmosphere, and what's really interesting is what looks bold from the outside often feels surprisingly natural from the inside. That's something most people don't realise until they actually wear them. And this is where things become even more interesting, because once you move beyond standard stock lenses, you enter the world of customisation. Something that you've probably never been offered, but something that we specialise in. Dinamica is probably the most customisable photochromic system we currently work with, because you can combine it with an almost unlimited palette of base tints underneath its photochromic layer. And this is something we do day in and day out at the Optical Gallery for clients all around the world. So now you're not just choosing a photochromic lens, you're designing atmosphere, contrast, colour interaction, mood and visual experience. Alongside style, of course. That's a huge reason why so many people are gravitating towards Dinamica right now. Because it allows lenses to become deeply personal. Now transitions have also become far more customizable recently as well. In the past, independent labs would often pair a subtle tint to the photochromic layer, usually matching tones close to the activated state. And now SLR have started to lean into that idea more directly with their new Transitions Colour Touch range, which honestly makes a lot of sense because people no longer just think sun protection. And then there's Zeiss PhotoFusion, which definitely sits slightly differently. Now yes, you can tint PhotoFusion, but because Zeiss's ecosystem is much more in-house, it's naturally a little bit more niche finding people willing or able to customize it at the same level. And honestly, the best way I can describe Zeiss is a little bit like Apple. Everything is designed to work beautifully in its own ecosystem. Very polished, very refined, very controlled. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what they want. But while all of this sounds great technically, what actually matters is how the world feels through them. And just to be clear, the camera never perfectly pictures what the human eye experiences through the lenses. But this gives you, surprisingly, a close idea of the atmosphere each one creates. So we're going to test them through greenery, open sky, urban environments, and harsher lighting. Because different lenses react very differently depending on the atmosphere around. And we'll start with Dinamica Amaranth.
Let the comparison begin.
This is Amaranth, and honestly, this might actually be the most naturally wearable lens of the group. It feels shaded, balanced, calm, but it's still incredibly clear. And what's interesting is, although it looks visually quite expressive from the outside, on the inside it actually feels very easy to settle into. In many ways, this probably sits closest to Burgundy when actually wearing it. Now this is Pink Rio, and immediately it feels more enhancing. Colours feel more reactive, highlights pop slightly quicker, and honestly, there's something about this lens that just feels happy. Softer, warmer, more expressive, and this is why Dinamica really separates itself from me. Because this doesn't just feel like lens technology, it feels like atmosphere design. Now, PhotoFusion Burgundy. And honestly, this keeps the world feeling surprisingly natural. You still get warmth, you still get atmosphere, but everything feels slightly brighter overall. The sky deepens slightly, contrast lifts slightly, but it never really feels overpowering. And what I like about Burgundy is it feels refined, expressive without constantly knowing that you've got a lens there. And finally, Transitions Ruby. This definitely feels like the darkest lens of the group. More shaded, more sunlight with a subtle ruby warmth underneath. And honestly, for somebody coming from traditional sunglasses, this is going to probably feel the most familiar overall. It feels controlled, comfortable, protective, and because it's slightly more neutral intensity, it works incredibly naturally across all environments. Now, something else worth mentioning is how differently these lenses fade back to clear. And honestly, this matters more than people realise in day-to-day wear. Transitions Ruby is definitely the fastest to return back. PhotoFusion follows up shortly behind, and then it's the Dinamicas. Amaranth first, with Pink Rio taking the longest overall. Again, none of this necessarily means it's better. It just depends on what type of experience you personally prefer. Some people want speed and subtlety, others actually enjoy the atmosphere slightly lingering longer. This is where modern eyewear becomes really interesting to me. Because once you stop thinking about lenses as just clear or dark, you start realising that they can completely change the feeling of an environment. Some feel calmer, brighter, softer, more expressive, more protective, more atmospheric. And that's why I think people are becoming more emotionally connected to eyewear now. Not just because of how their glasses look, but because how they make them feel. And if you want to dive deeper into either the new Transitions Gen S range or the Dinamica collection, you can watch either of those videos next. They're on the screen now. Until next time, protect your eyes and look good doing it.